guys, I hope this finds all of you well. So we're getting closer to the end of the semester, and I just want to touch base with you first of all on what to expect going forward. And also, just to reiterate some things for you to focus on as you are in the final stages of your essay, hopefully. Some of you might not be, but you need to be if you're not. So, first of all, my plan is for this to most likely be the last of our videos, simply because by next week you will be at the tail end of your essay, and I feel like it would best serve you to use that time to really edit on your own, rather than having another thing to watch. I feel like I will have been able to communicate to you everything that I need to at that point. However, that said, I am happy to make another video if you do have any questions lingering, or if you just have something else that you want me to talk about. So feel free, as always, to email me if something comes up or if you find yourself struggling with something, and I'm happy to look at that and to see if there seems to be a general consensus of being stuck in a certain point in your essays. And in your essay writing. So that's the plan for that. I considered doing some sort of e-learning message board type of thing, but at the end of the day, I just felt like you guys have so much going on, and it's already a lot to try to transition from a traditional classroom environment to completely, internet-based classes, and I just didn't want to add one more thing to your plate. So here's my suggestion for you though, because you do need somebody to look at your stuff. I would recommend that you all go and look at the writing lab. Okay, the writing lab is still running, going strong as they always are. The writing lab is like Waffle House. They never give up, right? So I would recommend that you look into the services that they are still offering. They can help you immensely. The other thing that I would suggest is that you consider using the Message Composer feature, which used to be Group Mail, for those of you who might be more familiar with it under those terms. And you can email your whole class and see if somebody wants to swap papers with you. And you can, either do just a quick pass or an in-depth edit, just depending on what the two of you want to do. But I feel like that would better allow you to customize the feedback that you're getting, because I know some of you are in, just really challenging situations, and the last thing you need is one more assignment added on that's supposed to be something that's going to be of benefit, not of just a thing to tack on, right? But others of you I know are in a place where you could do that. You could give one another feedback. And so that's what I would really like for you to do going forward, is to reach out to one another, or even, if you are in touch with one another already, then please take the initiative and say, hey, you want to swap papers? You want to look through this? At the very least, even if you just don't feel comfortable with either of those things, or if you're just overwhelmed, right? Because it's so easy, like day by day, just to get overwhelmed by this stuff. I know I have been very overwhelmed, just kind of fine, and then all of a sudden totally overwhelmed, right? And so if you're in that position, it really is okay for this to not be the best paper you've ever written in your life, okay? Like, give yourself permission for that, but it does need to be done. And it does need to be good, okay? So there's some sort of a continuum there between best of all time and just quitting, right? So what I recommend if you're in that situation, especially if you find that you have not really drafted your paper yet, which you should have been doing, but if you are just not, if you're just not, I would recommend that you read it out loud to yourself, which you should be doing with all your papers, not just for this class, because it's immensely helpful to catch the errors that you might have. For whatever reason, and this is true just for all writing, but for whatever reason, when we read things just silently to ourselves, we will compensate for the errors within them because our brains know what to look over because we wrote it, so we know what we mean. But when we say it out loud, suddenly we catch ourselves and we find those different aspects that we might have otherwise missed. So I would highly recommend that you do that, okay? So again, please email me with any questions that you have as you continue to develop your papers, and that would be the plan at this point going forward. Okay, so today I want to talk with you about two final things that I think will really help you as you are editing. And what I would like for you to do is to get your paper out, and you can either pause this video and go grab it if you have a hard copy, or if you have your laptop and you're watching on your phone, it might be easy to do that. And either bring up a new Word document or find a notepad that you can write on. I think it's best if you can write it personally, just because it gets your hand writing and it kind of engages your brain, but whatever you want to do is fine with me. And I want you, as I'm talking, to write out your thesis, and then I want you to write out each of your subclaims underneath that, okay? So as you are doing that exercise, keep listening as you're doing that, okay? As you're doing that exercise, there are a couple things I want you to look for in those elements within your paper. The first one is going to be nuance. So we spoke in the past couple weeks a lot about specificity as well as development within your paragraphs and how the structure of that should look. One thing that I think we can talk about a little bit more at this stage in the game is the nuance of the argument itself. So what I mean by that is, are you accounting for all of the possible variables that are implicit within these topics that you're bringing up? Or are you simplifying for the sake of often making it easier on yourself, right? So for example, I might have some sort of argument about how death functions in the life of Death, and say something like, death follows the character of the doe around throughout the entirety of the story that's depicted, or something like that. Well, that's great. That's true, right? But what makes that significant? What makes that special? In other words, what is it about your unique argument, your unique paper and perspective that gives us a different way to look at the text? Because we have heard these types of generalizations before, right? And on a very basic level, I'm sorry, my dog is walking in the room. She's so cute. She's just a little distracting. Okay, I thought she was going to get on the camera. That would have been really hilarious. We're all good. You guys would have loved her though. She's very cute. She's a Cocker Spaniel. She's adorable. But on a very basic level, you know, when we first approach a text, we often come to it with these kind of gut reactions, these initial reactions. Well, those are fine, and those are a great starting point. But that is not what you want the end point to be for your paper. You want to make sure that as you continue to develop it, and especially as you get it to a place where it's ready to submit, that you're accounting for nuance as well. So for example, a character that might look like they are a simple villain and just represent evil in the story, look and kind of peel back the layers to see if maybe there's more than that. So if you're talking about death in the life and death, you know, you can talk about something that we would not typically attribute to that character that we do attribute under these different circumstances. Maybe a gentleness or a grace or mercy, or the way that the light imagery plays in, right? Same thing with Frankenstein, with the monster. Like if you're going to be talking through the monster, then you don't want to just take that as a one-sided figure. And this same applies to not only your villains, but also your protagonists and your heroes and heroines of these different stories. And the same thing also holds true for the ways in which these characters are interacting and the ways in which the symbols are functioning. So ask yourself, have I accepted a surface level interpretation in order to get an easy kind of claim out of this, and to make it just sort of shove it into the puzzle where there's a piece missing? You know how like when you're down to your last few pieces in a puzzle, you guys are like, we haven't done puzzles since we're 10, but just hang with me here. You know how when you get to those last few pieces and one of the pieces you just know it needs to fit in a certain spot and it's not fitting, so you just sort of like shove it in, and then you realize later that it wasn't supposed to go there and that you had like bent all the edges up, right? Some of you are doing that with the pieces of your argument. Don't, okay? Because even though it might seem simpler at the time, it's actually going to cause you a whole lot of trouble in the long run, and it's going to prevent you from having the level of depth and analysis that you really need. So that's what I mean when I say pay attention to nuance. Really tease out all of the different elements at play in your characters, in your symbols, even in the interactions that they have with one another. And that will then allow you to ask questions like, who is ultimately, you know, who has the agency? Who is ultimately at fault or responsible? Is there hope? Is this providing a critique of something? Is there a change that's being suggested? And if there's not, then why? And is there a possibility that one could be suggested through another means? You know, these types of things we can start to talk about once we're willing to have a really honest and in-depth conversation about the nuance and the layers of our characters. Okay? The other thing that I want you to look at, as hopefully you've finished jotting down your subclaims at this point, the other thing I want you to look at is how they are developing from one another. What are the connecting points between them, in other words? I mentioned that last week, how you want to begin to really develop your connecting points. Now that we've come to this point, this week, I want you to look and to check to see if you actually have those like they need to be. Okay? Are they progressing? Are they developing from one to the next? And if not, if they read more like a list where you're just saying, you know, the following symbols shows how life or hope or for that matter, it could be some kind of historical or economic or, you know, feminism, Marxism, whatever, you name it, how this functions in the text. Are you just listing symbols that function that way, or are you showing us different aspects of how the symbols or the characters or what have you function that way so that we see all sides as building off one another? I want you to go back through and I want you to read those subclaims that you've just written down, and I want you to check for that. Check to see if they are developing from one another, and if they are not, ask yourself how you can fix that, usually based off of what you already have in your close reading. Okay? So what is it about the way that I'm approaching a text that allows me to have a very unique perspective in a reading to it? What do I have to offer in this that's different from what the research has already offered? And how can I then articulate and highlight that in the ways in which I'm presenting myself? That's what you want to ask. You have to play to your strengths, and you really want to figure out what you're developing that's different from the other voices. So that way you are connected to the other voices, and yet you're distinguishing yourself from them in your own critical space within the paper. And that way, hypothetically, somebody else could come in, down the road if this were published, and then they could refer to your paper in the same way that you have referred to the others. Think of yourself as a contributor to the critical conversation in that way. So, as you go back and you look again through those subclaims, it's always a good idea to think through phrases that connect them. You don't even necessarily have to write these phrases into the subclaims, but they're helpful for you. So things like blah, 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 blah from this paragraph leads to blah, 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 blah. Or another aspect of this is shown through this new thing, which shows blah, 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 right? Those types of connecting words, connecting verbiage can really help you to figure out what the holes are in creating lists versus actually creating ideas that develop from one thing to the next. And it's okay to list multiple characters. I don't mean to say that it's not, but you have to do that within the context of, again, progressing and developing your ideas instead of just kind of ping-ponging back and forth. Okay? So those are the biggest things that I wanted to recommend to you. I would also recommend, just to kind of review, that now that you've written down your subclaims, you go in and you do the same exercise I gave you a couple weeks ago. You look for any vague words or terminology or any spaces where it seems like your claim has just simply sort of fallen off of the cliff suddenly, where there's more to explore there, where you can really look through the complexity a bit more and the implications a bit more, and then articulate that. You know, you want to lead with your best information first. So don't try to save it for the end of the paragraph or even the end of the paper for that matter, because you won't have anything to develop if you do that, okay? So those are my best recommendations for you. I'm going to try to keep this relatively short, even though I could probably keep rambling about this for a while, because I feel like that really gets to the heart of it. So again, if you have any questions about that or where that takes you, after you go through that exercise, I am always here for you, and I'm very confident that you guys are going to do great with this paper and great with the rest of the semester. And at the end of the day, give yourself a little bit of grace, because the important thing is that you continue showing up and that you do your best. And it might not look like your best did a couple months ago. You know, if you're in a position where you are worried about your job, you're worried about, you know, all the things going on, but you still need to show up and you still need to give it a good effort. Okay. So I'm here if anything comes up in that process. And again, please consider using the Writing Lab as well as Message Composer, reaching out to one another for any type of more specific help that you might need. And of course, I'm always here for that as well. But I know it's helpful to swap with somebody else so you can both get that feedback. So I think that's all I have to say. Again, if anything comes up, let me know. And otherwise, I will talk to you guys later.